Well, hello everybody. Welcome to the final part or part 3 of an introduction to basics of watercolor. Um, as you can see, I got everything laid out, but I wanted to introduce something before I get started on the actual projects. I wanted to show you one of the things that I use as a tool. Now, I have a different kind of sponge that I actually use, but this one is nice for traveling. What it is, a simple sponge, an absorbent sponge, something that's a sponge that stays soft longer, because you know how some of the sponges really dry out. Just gonna put some water on this one, and what it is instead of using a paper towel to wipe your brush, you can use this, and this will get the excess water because it's absorbing off your brush. So if I really get a very drippy brush, I can just gently, and then it's still moist enough that I can paint with. So it is a good tool to have. So if you see them, now I'd be careful. They really overcharge for a basic sponge. A Ziploc bag and a sponge from a dollar store is just as good, okay? So don't be spending lots of money for no reason. Now, all right, so with our first two projects, this is our painting with our warm colors. As you can see how the purple came out, and you can see that I kept it very transparent. I even threw a bird in there. I did that after the fact. I didn't draw that in there. When you know you're gonna put little things in there, you don't always have to draw everything out. And you can't really see my pencil lines. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start painting with black. And I want to make sure I get the right, and just like any of the other colors, is just getting things started. I want to make sure it's thin enough. I probably should get my paper towel or my sponge handy, but I think for the video I'll stay with the paper towel just so you can see me use that. Now, I just want you to watch. I'm just going to do a section. As you can see, the black is still transparent, but it's that where you get that, because of the layers, it's more opaque. So it's not black like you see. Now this is going to, of course, dry a little thinner. It's not going to be like acrylic painting, but it's going to look very black. And because I did that, when that dries, and hopefully when I do the other painting, I'm going to come back to this one, you're going to get to see how solid that looks and how rich that black looks without it being sticky, without it, reflecting the light and stuff like that. And guys, I'm going to put this in time lapse, so you don't have to watch me like paint and talk at the same time. So I'll be back in a moment. So I also hope that the time lapse has music. I'm going to be experimenting. I have to use a new video program. So I know they're not very long. They're just a few seconds when they go to time lapse, but I got everything black. And I want you to just take a look at that. I'm going to come back to this. I'm going to switch out my water. As you can see, I haven't switched out my water. And I didn't really talk about that. You switch your water out as you see fit. I just know from experience I was going to get darker and darker, so it didn't really matter about the water. It's okay if your water is a little dirty and a little different and stuff like that. I know that seems like everyone should know that, but they don't. So I'm going to flip this around, get new water, and we'll continue. All right. What do you think about this? As you can see, I finished the trees, even added a few more darker mountains, and just let everything blend in. And the best part of this is I didn't look at pictures for either one of them. Now, when you want to do a palm tree, you may want to look at pictures, and you may need to look at pictures for evergreen. Now, what will I do to finish this one off? Let me show you. Just like we did when I initially did the lines, I'm gonna take brown. Now, could I use black for this? Yes, I could. I could take some of this black and mix it in. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make a darker green, okay? Now, could I use other colors? Sometimes we can highlight by using lighter colors. The other thing we can do, and now I'm not gonna show you masking and stuff like that. Don't worry if you don't understand what I'm saying, is we can do something with white and really get a nice bunch of highlights. You know, I cleaned the tray yesterday and I probably could have just let it dry out and used a color today. Remember what I said, watercolor can be activated for several decades after. I actually don't know how long it can be, but it could be a couple decades. I've had a couple watercolor paintings that I've gotten wet again after 20 years and they still. Now, the reason I'm making a darker green is because I can go in and make some highlights to the trees that are closer to me. And I can just kind of work and make those strokes. Now, I could also use a smaller brush and make those details. I brought several brushes, doesn't mean I was going to use them. And I'm gonna do this to all the trees. And then in some areas, I might just darken what we've already seen and create a shadow. So it doesn't have to be just a pure line. And even go back in and spread it out. So this is where you're gonna spend your time figuring out where you're happy with the trees. Could I paint like a small brown eagle in the background? I could, or any other kind of birds, because what we're doing, and this is, like I said, very important, we're painting dry on wet. That's the technique we're using. And the reason for that is so the watercolor paint's a little thicker, but still transparent. We're not building, the hardest thing for students to understand is that we're keeping the transparency, because I think you can still see some of the blues and purples coming through the tree, not perfectly, and that's great. Now, is this the only way we're painting? No, this is how we get started. This is how we learn how the paint interacts with each other. And I'm going to show you just one more thing, or a couple more things I should say, because I'm going to flip this back around. So I'm going to just pretend I am finished, and I'm going to remove the tape. You're going to say, why did he get water? I just want to show you something. Notice the paper here, especially when it comes to watercolor paper. When you get it wet, you have a good chance that you're going to just take some of the paper with you. And I was kind of expecting that. Now, does all the watercolor paper do that? No. And does all the tape that you use do that? No. As you know, there's some masking tape that it doesn't seem to hold very well. And a lot of times that paint doesn't do that. And as you can see over here, it leaked through. I don't have that strong white line, and that's okay. Again, if you look at watercolor paintings, you'll notice that too. And when you become an expert at that, like when I would do this, I would have it at a slant so I could see that I'm even. And when I do larger pieces, I actually have thinner tape, so I can just put it right in the middle. Oops. And you know, I want you to notice that it's much better when you pull it at an angle, okay? Versus when I'm pulling it straight up. You're definitely more likely going to rip it and stuff like that when you pull it straight up. And this one is the only one I didn't put that, you notice that I curl it up a little bit so it's easier. I'm gonna still hold this down. And so when I would mat something like this, I would, you know, just balance it. Do I need to fix the edges? I actually don't. I'm gonna tell you, like if this leaked through on my final piece, it's beautiful. I'm not gonna worry about that. What I'm gonna do is I'll probably just balance the mat. And then if when I put the mat on, if I notice I have white at the bottom, that might be where I actually sign it. And I might even write the title in pencil there. You'll see that a lot with watercolor paintings and stuff like that. I'm gonna flip this around because I do want to show you one more thing, because we talked about wet on dry. I said it backwards, that's why I hesitated, because the paint is wet and then I'm gonna dry. But let's just say I want to tone, like darken the tone of the water. I don't usually paint like suns. Now I could paint the reflection, like the sun's high in the sky and stuff. And this is probably like silhouettes are the most forgiving, where you put a sun. I'm better off with moons, but I want to do wet on wet when I do the water. Now this is not completely dry. This is why I'm kind of going back and forth a little bit. When you do both projects, you're going to go back and forth. This is what we call a mister. I'm going to spray it. And you can see, so I'm gonna just get the paper a little wet. And so when you can see what's happening. And this is why you wanna be careful. No, I knew this was I'm not too worried. When this happens, you're just gonna stroke it out. And then I'm gonna paint my orange on top, and I'll get the effect that I want. So I want you guys to realize that watercolor isn't as simple as people like to make it to be. And we get a little yellow into that. And this is where I can get things to be a little different, okay? As you can see, I'm getting that wet on wet because it's gonna become more transparent. And yes, there's going to be more touch. Now, if I was going to do the water, I probably would do it in the purple phase and not the black phase, because like anything else, the moment something touches black, it becomes, it's tainted by the black, okay? So we are good there, don't worry. I will fix that, and but as you can see, why we go through the process, I'm just looking for, I guess, here is a pad, and you don't need to know, and I just want you to know you are not alone. And I hope this makes sense on what wet on dry and wet on wet painting is. And you guys enjoy these first two basic projects, because the projects we got coming up next, they're going to be a little more complicated, a lot more layering, and I'll probably introduce you to the hair dryer where we dry in between layers, okay? You guys have a great day. Bye-bye.